Timber storage 101, let's do this very quickly. You want to have it stacked in such a way that it is fully supported underneath and has as much airflow going around the piece of wood as humanly possible. The air takes the moisture that is in the wood as it sweats out and blows it away and takes it into the water table and stuff like that. And forgive me, my neighbours just seems to mow the lawn all the time. It needs to be supported properly, hence the Triton wood racks, and it needs to have airflow, hence stickers helping it stack up. The stickers need to be in line with each other so that you're not putting in warping or creating stress, and they need to be the same thickness as well. Other than that, what you're trying to do is take the moisture content of the wood down to such a degree that you can work with it and build a guitar. Now, kiln-dried timber you can get down to 7-8%, and it will be perfect for guitar building. Air dried, if the piece of wood has never been in a kiln and it's just air drying, the average equilibrium moisture content of a piece of wood that is just left to air dry properly in the UK is about 13 or 14%. You can take that and kiln dry it down to 7 or 8, and then take that same piece of wood, chuck it out, leave it in your kitchen, for example, for 6 months, and it might take on a few percentage points of moisture, but it's never going to get all the way back up to that 14%. However, if it's just air dried, it's going to sit at around that point. Now, do you have to have wood that is dry, like 7 or 8%, in order to build a guitar body, a solid guitar body? Probably not so much, to be honest. In fact, Krenov, fantastic furniture maker, sadly no longer with us, he exclusively liked using air-dried wood because it works better, it feels, in his opinion, better to work with. And I quite agree with him. It's not as dried, but it's kiln drying something forces it, essentially cooks the wood, and it cooks all of the minerals, and it crystallizes everything, and it becomes hard. Dry, but harder. And in some cases, for example with torrefied timber, it's not only hard, it's actually brittle. So a sycamore that would have been relatively pliable and easy to carve and almost rubbery, I suppose. It's so difficult to describe how something works when you're cutting it with a sharp plane or something. That put through a torrefication process, which is cooking it in a kiln, in an oven at a high temperature, in a vacuum as well. That leaves the wood very brittle, and it cuts beautifully, and it works very well, and it smells gorgeous and looks nice. But if you're hitting it with a router and you take a little bit too much off around a headstock, for example, it's going to chip away, and it's just never fun. Am I getting too emotional about this? So yeah, there is the argument air-dried versus kiln-dried. With guitars and guitar building, what we don't want is to have a guitar that you've built in your workshop. Say you work in a shed at the end of your garden, a lot, like this, and you don't have heaters, you don't have dehumidifiers going, and your wood is even wetter than the 13 or 14% that air-dried timber will get to. Say it's 18%. You build that guitar, you take it up to your house, and over the next 6 months or a year, it's going to continue losing moisture unless you've slathered it in really thick lacquer. And we're not going to do that, are we? At that point, your joints start to have issues. Your frets are going to start sprouting, and the neck may well twist if there's stresses inside of the neck wood that you didn't know about. This is why we dry our wood. I wasn't planning on saying any of this. This was going to be a 10-second outro with just a tiny little bit more information. Yeah. What do you think? Air-dried versus kiln-dried? I think on a neck, it's very important that even if it isn't kiln dried, it is as dry as you can possibly get it. And it's possible to build a small kiln, literally a cupboard and a light bulb, not an LED bulb, one of the older ones that actually produces a little bit of heat, and a tiny little desk fan, USB powered desk fan, makes a small kiln that slowly will dry your fretboards to a point where they will be 7 or 8 or 9%, and they will not shrink over time. You could potentially do the same thing with necks. Hell, you could build a small kiln big enough to deal with enough body blanks and neck blanks in your workshop for a small builder to build 4 or 5 guitars in a year. And it's not difficult, but it's also not necessarily necessary. If you are armed with a well-regulated workshop, well-insulated, without any double glazing, and you keep your windows shut during the cold season, wet season, and you've got a dehumidifier and you've got a good moisture meter, you've got a nice racking system that allows you to have everything either stickered up and stacked nicely or leant up against the wall with space to breathe, you should be fine. The last thing we want is to store our wood, is to dry our wood in a manner that is not conducive to building a guitar, because after all, in the end, everything we're doing is about that end result. There are few things more soul-wrenching than having delivered an instrument to a customer or had it in your house for a year and you realize that the neck has twisted or the frets have sprouted and you're gonna have to rework. Rework sucks. So yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know what your tips and tricks are in the comments below. But for now, I'm going to take what was a 5-minute video and it's going to be half an hour, and I'll see you soon. I've got more wood to move at this point. And that neighbour's still mowing his lawn. He doesn't even have such a large lawn. I don't understand.
Burn it. Perfect!